Accustomed as Franz was to the Italian phraseology, his first impulse was to look around him, but these words were addressed to him. Franz was the excellency, the vehicle was the carriage, and the Hotel de Londres was the palace. The genius for laudation characteristic of the race was in that phrase. Franz and Albert descended. The carriage approached the palace. Their excellencies stretched their legs along the seats. The cicerone sprang into the seat behind. "Where do your excellencies wish to go?" asked he. "To St. Peter's first, then to the Colosseum," returned Albert. But Albert did not know that it takes a day to see St. Peter's, and a month to study it. The day was passed at St. Peter's alone. Suddenly, the daylight began to fade away. Franz took out his watch. It was 4:30. They returned to the hotel, and at the door Franz ordered the coachman to be ready at 8. He wished to show Albert the Colosseum by moonlight, as he had shown him St. Peter's by daylight. When we show a friend a city one has already visited, we feel the same pride as when we point out a woman whose lover we have been. He was to leave the city by the Porta del Popolo, skirt the outer wall, and re-enter by the Porta San Giovanni. Thus they would behold the Colosseum, without finding their impressions dulled by first looking on the Capitol, the Forum, the Arch of Septimus Severus, the Temple of Antinous and Faustina, and the Via Sacra. Holy crap, folks, my cat was meowing a storm up while I was trying to record that. Whew! You won't hear it, but that was a struggle. Additionally, this passage puts a lot into mind for me. One of which is that Dumas spent a lot of time in his career toward the latter half of his playwriting. Not that he ever gave up playwriting, but like right before he went into novels, a handful of years before that, he spent time traveling and writing travel logs. There's a famous one of Dumas in Switzerland. He has a few others. The thing is, these are really hard to find. I wanted to do some research by reading a few of them and getting a understanding of them, so that I could report kind of what it felt like to read them and what his sensibilities are while traveling abroad, what his predilections are, how he chooses to depict this. Because travel logs were really popular at the time because not everyone could go and travel. Interesting time in that the literacy in France was on the rise, people reading this story in the newspaper as it's published. The literacy for that is increasing, but the ability to travel is not. And that's true for quite a few decades beyond this as well. So travel logs were a way for people to experience the world, even if they couldn't afford to go somewhere. I remember having a mind-blowing revelation while reading the book Moby Dick, recognizing that it's half story and half instruction manual or travel log or documentary on whaling. It was a way to educate people on the process of whaling and fishing while delivering them an adventure story. Without knowing that going into that story, I was just like, wow, I was not expecting there to be this much detail on knot tying and the types of ropes that exist on a ship. But that was educational for people at the time. All of that to say that I think Dumas and his travelogue writings took a lot of that in his novel writing. You see that a bit in The Three Musketeers, but look at what we've experienced here on the show so far. Lots of discussions about the landscape and the proximity of islands to one another, but more in how he describes the landscapes. And now that we have Albert and Franz in Italy, in Rome specifically, I feel like Dumas is tapping into his travelogue writing to bring us, the readers, along for what Albert and Franz are experiencing, to give readers, like, this is what it would feel like. I'm using real places, I'm mentioning real places, when he says that, but Albert did not know that it takes a day to see St. Peter's, and a month to study it. The day was passed at St. Peter's alone. Like, that's not something you would know as a reader, as someone who just kind of casually knows St. Peter's as an icon. that's something you only get if you've been there and you stand in its magnificence and want to really take in all of its details. I think I've made this comparison before, but it's kind of like I spent 15 years out in Los Angeles, and whenever someone came to visit that hadn't been there before, they wanted to see the mainstays. They wanted to see the Hollywood sign, the Walk of Fame, and in quite the opposite of St. Peter's, it's like, okay, well, that's going to take 15 minutes. What do you want to do with the rest of the day? Because you think it's going to be this magnificent thing that you go and experience when it's really like, oh yeah, you can see it out your window and there it is on the ground. You want to find parking and go and walk along the Walk of Fame for a second? Cool, there it is. There's really nowhere to go unless you want to go into a souvenir shop or the M&M store. Maybe you could take in a movie at the Chinese theater. But yeah, you wouldn't know that unless you've been there. And there's been no grandiose travelogue writer that has, to my knowledge, captured the imagination of what it's like to walk on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, which is underwhelming. I'll also say, I haven't mentioned this chapter yet because I had so much personal shit I had to get through with you all. The roaminess of this is really, as someone who has Italian heritage, it's taking everything I have not to give everything a slight Italian accent. I'm not Italian. I have Italian Sicilian heritage. Maybe I'm related to that rich gentleman on the floor that they're on. But it's hard for me not to go the Cicerone, or the affettatore. But what good is that going to do any of us? It's not going to. So I didn't do it, but I commented on it. And that filled out an entire episode. Ha-cha-cha. Let's see if they enjoy the Colosseum, shall we? Join me here tomorrow as we continue with Franz and Albert on their 3-day trip through the Carnival at Rome. Okay, goodbye. The Countdown of Monte Cristo is part of the Gruntwork Podcast Network. This show is produced, edited, and hosted by Landon Solano. The original text of The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. Theme song by Magic Solo. If you want to support the show and others like it, visit patreon.com/gruntworkpod. Thank you for listening. See you tomorrow.